Hi, I'm Jim McCann, founder of 1-800-Flowers. We created this podcast to share the wonderful people we get to interact with, we get to meet, we get to know, and most importantly, get to learn from. So I invite you to join us on this journey here on the Celebrations Chatter podcast. Today we're with Dr. Chapman. He's the author of a book called The 5 Love Languages, which is a long time published now, 1992, and has sold over 20 million copies. But Dr. Chapman, I know that's not your day job, but I so admire and respect what you've built here in terms of your merging your day job with your extra job. And I just wonder, with 20 million copies of your book in print, so many different languages, 133 million people have taken the 5 love languages quiz. What impact do you think you've had on people around the world? And the most important thing to them is the relationships they have.
You know, Jim, I stand amazed, to be honest with you, at the impact this book has had on marriages around the world. First of all, in the United States, but secondly, in other countries, because my background before I studied counseling was cultural anthropology, how cultures are organized all over the world. I was very sensitive to cultural differences. So when the first publisher came, which happened to be Spanish, and wanted to get the rights to publish the book in Spanish, I said to my publisher, I don't know if this works in Spanish culture. And they said, well, they've read the book and they want to publish it. I said, okay, let's go.
Apparently, love languages aren't just in English.
Well, you're right. And that surprised me because it became their bestseller. And they sold, I think, 3 million copies in Spanish. So, and then it went to all the other, 60-some cultures. So apparently now, I believe that these 5 languages are pretty consistent with human nature, even though there are cultural differences, to be sure, in how you would express these languages, what I call different dialects of the languages. But the 5 languages seem to be pretty fundamental to human nature. And I'm just greatly encouraged with the number of people that have been, whose marriages and relationships have been impacted positively by the concept of the 5 love languages.
Dr. Chapman, a little bit of background. You mentioned that your background would have been in cultural anthropology, or at least an interest. Where did you grow up? Where did you go to school?
I grew up in the little town of China Grove, North Carolina. Uh-huh. It's not the China Grove that the Doobie Brothers used to sing about.
Were you a Doobie?
No. It was a little 2,000 population town, a little textile town in the middle of North Carolina. Uh-huh. North Carolina was big textile country in those days. And so
textile and tobacco, right?
That's correct. Now I live in Winston-Salem, and I've lived for over 50 years in Winston-Salem, which is the home of Winston-Salem cigarettes. So, that's my background in the middle of North Carolina.
And tell us about your ministry.
Well, I've worked on a church staff, the same church staff, for over 50 years now. Wow. As a matter of fact, I went in 2 years ago to the senior pastor, and I said, I think after 50 years, I should get off the payroll. And he said, well, Gary, you're not going to leave us. I said, well, no, I'll be around, And he said, well, what if we let you keep your office and keep your assistant and you can do what you want to? I said, oh, that'd be great.
Sounds like a great deal.
So for the last 2 years, if I'm in town, I'm in the office every day, still seeing people. But I am now free to do more traveling, other places. And so, but I love everything I do. So I don't see any reason to quit doing what I'm doing, as long as I have energy.
And is counseling still a big part of your time commitment?
It is. I'm not doing long-term counseling now. I'm seeing people once or twice, and then if they need help, helping them find the right counselor in town, because we have good resources in town now. So that's the only difference, really. I'm not doing long-term counseling now, but I am still seeing people because I want to stay in touch with reality, and if you don't stay in touch with people's pain, then you can, go off into into the clouds and not really be talking about reality. So, so I plan to stay involved with people.
How wonderful. Tell us about your family.
Well, I have a wife. We've been married 62 years. She says she
Wow,
doesn't know
62
how.
years. That's terrific.
She says she doesn't know how that's possible because she's only 49.
My wife and
We
I
have
just
two.
celebrated our 50th, and I thought that was a big deal. We
Well,
have new
that
goals set for us.
is that's a big deal. 50. We have two grown children. Our daughter is a medical doctor. She delivers high risk babies. That's her specialty. And she and her husband and their two children live in Greenville, South Carolina. And then my son and his wife live in Austin, Texas. And
Oh, good.
so that's
Did you
our
get
basic
everybody
family.
together over the last holidays?
We did. We did.
Yeah.
Actually, our grandson is actually living in Winston-Salem now. He finished college in May and got married in June to a gal who lives in Portland, Oregon. So we were out there for the wedding, but just this weekend we did a little reception here on the East Coast for the people that didn't want to travel to Portland for the wedding. So we had them in town. So it was a great time this weekend, actually.
And when you're together as a family, does this topic come up? Certainly relationships come up, but
Yeah.
do you with your kids or your grandkids get into conversations about your work and how the evolution of your thoughts around the five love languages is changing and growing with all the different inputs that you get?
Yeah, we do discuss the love languages. In fact, it was very interesting in the little reception we just had. There was a series of questions that were asked to the newly married couple, and one of them was, "What is your love language?" And obviously, they both knew their love languages. And my son, and I said to him now because he was in college and he had already gotten engaged, and I said, "Now, have you worked through my book, Things I Wish I'd Known Before We Got Married?" He said, "Oh yes, Papa. We worked through it at every chapter." I said, "Well, that's good."
So you're Papa too, huh?
I'm Papa, yeah.
We all seem to get our grandparent name from our oldest grandchild. Whatever he or she decides seems to stick.
That's what happened to us. We were talking about what we wanted to be called by the children, and our granddaughter, who was the oldest, she was crawling across the floor. I don't know how old she was, but she looked up and she said, "Papa."
And it stuck.
I said, okay, I guess I got my name.
Same experience in my family, and I love it.
Yeah. I like being Papa.
Yeah. I think the twist that we're about to go on here with working with you, Dr. Chapman, here at Flowers, is that we're taking a little turn on the work that you've done over all these years, and we're doing what you suggested to your grandson and his new wife. That is to make sure you know what the love languages are of your mate. And what I've learned in reading your materials and watching your remarks over the years is that it's a very handy tool to use to have in your pocket. That is a reminder to think about the person you want to have a relationship with. You want to grow your relationship, is to make sure you using your insights, not just to tell them about you and make sure they understand you, but for you to understand them. And just we had a car ride on Friday. Lisa, my assistant, and I, we were chatting about your work, and she was talking about how she and her husband have been going through the love languages and how she's been startled by HUD discoveries, but it's not too late or it's not too long into a relationship to do the work to know yourself better, and more importantly, to know your spouse or your partner or the person you're interested in having this wonderful and healthy relationship with. So it's never too late is what I'm gleaming from your work.
I agree with that. We're all in process, and with marriages, we're either getting better or we're getting worse. I mean, marriage relationships do not remain static. So we're either improving or we're getting better. And I think 5 love languages will help people at any stage in the relationship, and whether they're married or whether they're single. If it's a significant relationship, this concept is going to be extremely helpful in how to communicate love in a way that's meaningful to the other person. That's the issue. And of course, we also know it applies with children. I used to say to parents, the question is not, do you love your children? The question is, do your children feel loved? because we recognize one of our deepest emotional needs is to feel loved by the significant people in our lives. And if you're married and you feel loved by your spouse, life is beautiful. I don't mean we won't have conflicts, because that's normal part of life. But if you don't feel loved by them, and then you have the conflicts, that's when people begin to think, well, maybe we made a mistake. Maybe we're not made for each other, you know. And the reality is, it's just they've never learned how to communicate love in a way that meets that deep emotional need for love. So at whatever stage in life, we all have the need to feel loved by the significant people in our lives. And this concept helps you communicate that in a meaningful way.
Well, as we come up on the Valentine holiday here at Flowers, we're so happy to be working with you and your team, Dr. Chapman, on the little quiz we put together that you can go on and take on our site, on the Flowers site. You want to take the 5 love languages quiz. They're just 10 questions, and it's about the intended recipient of your expression of love, of fondness, of affection. And it's so quick and easy to do, but I just know that working with my family over the weekend and knowing that we were working on this, to have it sparked some really, really good and thoughtful conversation. And that must make you feel so good, because you hear that all the time. If you just get people a little guide to open up and have good, healthy, probing conversations. What you said at the very beginning of your remarks there about it's not enough to love your children, it's for them to know you love them. It just shook me when you said that, because it's so spot on, so clear and so obvious, but yet needs to be said.
Yeah. No, you're exactly right. And I think if we meet a child's need for love and they genuinely feel loved by us, all the rest of raising children is going to be much easier, because much of the misbehavior of children grows out of what I call an empty love tank. They don't feel loved. And the same thing is true with adults. Much of the misbehavior of adults grows out of an empty love tank. So this is a pretty huge issue in having healthy relationships. So I think, I'm glad that we're joining with you and your company, because, you've been helping people for a long, long time on this flower deal thing, as well as other things. And so I think
it's catching on too,
Yeah, you're right.
But yeah, it's sort of a coming awake on our part too, Dr. Chapman, to understand that yes, we have flowers and chocolates and balloons and cookies and all different kinds of gifts. Everything we sell is gifts, and all the gifts we sell are about helping our customers to have more and better relationships. So we're only involved in the aspect where they decide that an expression in the form of a gift is what they want to do to express themselves. Some of it's just because they want to, others because it's a calendar event that has some expectation tied to it. But being able to go online on the Flowers, 1-800-Flowers site and take that 5 love languages quiz will cause you to think differently. We have curated collections behind those findings that help you to make better decisions about. But then the whole key is after that, what do you say? And what do you say after the gift? How does it change how you think about the person you want to express yourself to, how you think about the person you want to invest in a relationship? And if we could share in the satisfaction that you have when you help somebody, we can contribute a little bit like that. And someone comes up to us a month from now and said, that little quiz I took really changed me to think differently and changed my behavior with regard to my significant other. And I really thank you for that. That will be the payday for us, and you get that all the time.
I do, and it's very, very encouraging. And I think what you all are doing is exciting because you're already dealing with the gifts. And if they can learn a little more in terms of like what type of gift, and then the things to say before they give the gift or after they give the gift that will meet that other person's need and make it even a more deeply felt expression of love.
Can we talk a little bit about the 5 different love languages? Give us some thoughts on how you came up with them and how relevant they are, even these, let's call it 30 plus years later.
Yeah, it actually grew out of my counseling. Couples would sit in my office, and one of them would say, I just feel like he doesn't love me or she doesn't love me. And the other would say, I don't get that. I mean, I do this and this and this and this. Why would you not feel loved? And I knew they were sincere, And in their mind, they were loving the other person, but the other person wasn't getting it emotionally. And so eventually I thought there's got to be a pattern to this. So I sat down and read several years of notes that I made when I was counseling and asked myself the question, when someone said, I feel like my spouse doesn't love me, what did they want? What were they complaining about? And their answers fell into 5 categories. And I later called them the 5 love languages and started using that in my counseling, that if you want her to feel love, you've got to learn to express love in her language. And if you want him to feel love, you've got to learn his language. And I would help couples discover their language, challenge them to go home and try it. And sometimes they would come back in 3 weeks and say, Gary, this is changing everything. I mean, the whole climate's different now. And then I started using it with small groups of couples, just teaching the concept. And the same thing would happen. And probably 5 years later, I thought, if I could put this concept in a book, write it in the language of the common person, leave a psychological jargon that a lot of people wouldn't understand, maybe I could help a lot of couples that I would never be able to see in my office. So that's what motivated me to write the book. And of course, I knew it would help, but I had no idea that it would have the audience that it has had around the world. But I knew it would help because I had used it, in my counseling and with couples for at least 8 or 9 years before I wrote the book.
I have a brother who had a milestone birthday, has one coming up, but we had a surprise party for him yesterday. And we were talking about your book when we got to the 5th of the love languages, physical touch. And she said, yeah, that is so not me. And he said, really? I said, you've been married 30 plus years.
It's amazing how couples can be married all these years, but when they read the concept and it dawns on them that what makes me feel loved doesn't necessarily make my spouse feel loved. Really? I thought all these years what I've been doing was good,
We put our heart into everything we do. We are farmers, bakers, florists, and makers who grow and create with a passion. Made with love at every step of the way. Because at the end of the day, we know you're sending more than a gift. 1-800-Flowers, share with love.
Dr. Chapman, we hear and have read so much evidence, especially over the last several years. There was an article written in the Wall Street Journal pre-COVID about my generation, the baby boomers, and how we're the loneliest generation, or at least we thought we were back then. But other generations are trying to claim that title too. So you work with people all the time and have through your ministry, through your counseling. And what are your thoughts on the impact of your work could have on helping people with this loneliness problem? We saw data just recently about 1 in 7 male adults, 1 in 7, says they don't have a single close friend.
Yeah.
That's startling. And it's something we're curious about and interested in. And of course, we've read that 25% of Generation Z, let's call them a 25-year-old, says they've never had a close friend. Yet here we have all these tools available to us for communication, for social interactivity and social media. It seems like the tools are more plentiful, but the problem's getting worse.
I think part of that reality is that you can't have close personal friendships if your contact is simply limited to online contact. Let's face it, nothing wrong with online contact. I mean, we're having a wonderful conversation here today because of technology. So I'm not anti-technology, but genuine friendships involve personal time with each other, doing things together, having long extended conversations about reality together. But what you're saying is so true. I remember I wrote a book, a year or two ago with an African-American friend of mine. We've been close friends for over 50 years now. And so we were doing some interviewing of people and to help us because we wanted to write a book on cross-cultural friendships. And so I remember walking up to an African American man in a restaurant. He looked to be in his 50s. He was had on a business suit, and I said, "Excuse me," I said, "I'm doing a little research on cross-cultural friendships." And I said, "Can I ask you a personal question?" And he said, "Sure." I said, "Do you have a close personal friendship with someone of a different race or culture?" And he thought a moment, and he said what you just said. He said, "I don't have a close personal friend of my own race." And tears almost came to
That
my
must have
eyes.
put you back on your heels, huh?
Absolutely. But the reality is there are many, many people that would say the same thing. You know, they don't have a personal friend of their own race, let alone somebody of a different culture. I believe that would have a tremendous impact on our culture. I'm thinking particularly of Western culture. If we could help people learn how to build close friendships. We all have acquaintances, and we say hi and good morning to people where we work and all that sort of thing. But many times we work around people for 15 or 20 years and we don't know anything about them. We don't know if they have children or it just amazes me that we can have that kind of proximity in the workplace and still not engage in conversations enough to get to know each other at a level that we might eventually call a friendship. But I do think if we understand the concept of the 5 love languages and let it be a part of our interfacing with people, it can be a road that leads us to develop close friendships.
Dr. Chapman, I understand you do a 1 minute a day podcast where you call, I think you call it the Love Language Minute. How could people, certainly I think, I'm certain there's a great benefit from that. Where can people find that and subscribe to it so that they get that minute message from you every day?
Yeah. If you go to 5lovelanguages.com, the number 5lovelanguages.com, they'll be able to sign up there for that. And so see all my other books and everything. Yeah. They can learn more than they want to know if they go to their website.
This is a subject area that you can't know enough about, and you can't spend enough time working on, because working on it, being conscious of it, learning is only going to inure to your benefit. It was just several weeks ago that I had occasion to chat with David Brooks, the New York Times columnist, public radio and public NPR broadcaster, and he has a book out now called Getting to Know Someone, really knowing someone. And he talked in there about a point in his life, sitting in his Virginia home, sitting at the dining room table, reading a book, and he described it as wife went to the front door, and she opened the door, and the way the light hit her, and she paused and tended to an orchid that she keeps right next to the front door. And he said, I found myself looking at her in such a way that it was beyond just looking, that I realized I really, really knew this woman. And I really, really loved this woman. And I just felt a sense of profound knowing. And he said, the only word I could think of that described how I felt at that moment was I was beholding her. And then about something that I had related to, which was, it's sort of how we look at our young grandchildren. You just look at them and you really, really know them, and you really genuinely, with all your heart, love them. But I don't think we can take it for granted that that's going to be each and every one of our cases, that we have to manifest that. And I have 7 grandkids, and the oldest is 15. And as they old and go through different age and go through different parts of their life, I'm wondering, how do I properly express my deep sense of caring and love for each of them? Because it's got to be different ways at different life stages, wouldn't it be?
Yeah. I think the primary love language of a child, you can discover about the time they're 4 years old, that there's one of them that stands out more than the others, and observe their behavior.
One of those love languages.
That's right. Physical touch, one of those love languages. For example, my son love language is physical touch. When he was about 4 years old, when I would come home from work in the afternoon, he would run to the door, grab my legs, and climb on me. He's touching me because he wants to be touched. Our daughter never did that. At that age, our daughter would say, Daddy, come to my room. I want to show you something. She wanted quality time. She wanted my undivided attention. So I think you can discover a child's primary love language at least by the time they're 4 years of age. But I want to add
underline the word primary there, right? That
Yeah,
doesn't mean the others don't
exactly.
apply.
Absolutely. I was just about to say that. I said, please don't hear me saying you only speak their primary language. No, no, no. Heavy doses of their primary, but speak the other four, because ideally we would like the child to know how to receive love and later give love in all five languages. That's the healthiest adult. And most of us didn't receive all five growing up, so we had to learn some of these when we got to be adults. So, but if you don't speak their primary love language and give them heavy doses of that, they will not feel loved, even though you're speaking some of the other languages to them.
There's so much wisdom in what you say there. We can all learn so much. And I'm excited that we're working together because I want to learn more of what you have to teach. And I want it to be a topic of conversations around the office and around our dining room tables. It's the most important thing to us because the most important thing to each of us at the end of the day is to have more and better relationships. The last point I'll ask you, Doctor, is you're really good at giving tips and hacks. So here we are headed into a season that's defined by Valentine holiday, which is all about expressing your love and affection. For me and for lots of people I know, that goes beyond our spouse or our special person in our life. It goes to my kids and my grandkids and other people around me. How do we think about appropriate expressions of affection and love to all the people in our life who we want to share that with, especially at a season that's all about love?
Yeah. Well, you're right. I think, it's in my mind, it's good that we have a Valentine's Day in our culture because everybody kind of agrees that's the time to give somebody something, and that's positive. And I think adding with that, what you've discussed already, if you can have some concept of the love language concept and know how to make the gift even more communicative in terms of emotionally to the other person. Everybody appreciates a gift. No one's going to turn away a gift. But if words of affirmation, for example, is their language, and you give them a word of affirmation as you give them that gift, the word of affirmation is going to mean as much as the gift does, and it's going to mean more together than it would be simply just giving them the gift. So that's where I think, our working together on this is going to enhance the value, emotional value of gift giving during the season.
And it seems to me that once we learn into that, the words of affirmation, that's something we can be disciplined about and calendar reminders for ourselves to say, I know last month was Valentine's Day, but here we are in March, and I want to make sure I put on my calendar to use words of affirmation because I've learned how important it is to my spouse. And maybe I'll develop the habit, and maybe I'll become better and better at it, because if that's what I know is so important to her, then it doesn't cost me anything.
Yeah,
monetarily to give it. In fact, it reminds me, my first career was in the social services. I worked at a home for teenage boys, 10 tough, very tough circumstance teenage boys. And these are kinds of kids I didn't want you to meet if you came to New York for a visit, because they might not be on the welcome wagon. Back then, it took me a while to learn that those 10 boys wanted to be loved too. They wanted to love and be loved. They wanted to feel safe. They wanted to know where the boundaries were. But each of them, this is a tool I wish I had back then.
Yeah.
To understand, you don't have relationships with groups. You have it with individuals, and each individual is going to be different. There was one kid who, if you physically touched him, he would go crazy. But our relationship became so strong that when I came into work in the evening, if I didn't go over and mess his hair, which was a mortal sin before we built the relationship, and we were going to be in a tough time, because that was our special way of connecting. Me saying, I care about you.
Yeah.
I want only good things for you. Yes, I'm the disciplinarian. I got to keep control here, but I have a special feeling for you, and I have a different feeling for him, and a different feeling for him. And when I finally learned that line, that your teachings before you wrote it, build relationships and was therefore able to have a positive influence in my life and, of course, in theirs. So your love languages apply in so many realms, Dr. Chapman. I'm so thrilled that we at 1-800-Flowers have discovered you, working with you and doing this, the 5 love language quiz on our website. I think it's going to help a lot of people. And how special for you in your career to do well, to be fulfilled by doing good for others. I mean, you've hit the jackpot.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Nothing more satisfying in life than investing your life in helping other people have good relationships. Tremendously satisfying.
Dr. Chapman, thanks for being so generous with your time today. I can't wait to see how this impacts people's lives, and I'm looking forward to the next time we get to chat too.
Thank you. Thank you. I look forward to it.
We put our heart into everything we do. We are farmers, bakers, florists, and makers who grow and create with a passion. 1-800-Flowers. Share with love.
Well, I hope you enjoyed what you heard, and I know I'll be sharing it forward. I hope you get to as well. Let's keep the conversation going. Follow me along on Twitter at Jim 1-800-Flowers and on LinkedIn at Jim McCann. Hope to talk to you soon.